The chapter kicks off with Zack calling Gongseop a shitty monk and complaining about the fact that he's even here in the first place, which I mean rightfully so. At this point it seems like PTJ can't give Zack his own fight without having to throw in a couple distractions to put him at a disadvantage, or not even give him a spotlight to be honest. First it was Hudson getting his ass kicked, and now a fat paraplegic old man carrying a wooden fish shows up and starts taking the spotlight from him and distracting him from fighting a battle he could most certainly win. I don't know what drives PTJ to make this decision, but hey. We then move on to Zack asking Gongseop if he's here because he doesn't trust Zack, and more specifically doesn't trust that he could beat a first generation king level opponent, to which Gongseop answers, isn't it yourself that you don't trust? And what he's basically implying here is that he could have been here for any reason. He could have been here to just watch Zack fight, maybe teach him how to win, or maybe just fucking hang out with Taesoo for some reason. He could have been here for whatever reason, but the fact that Zack immediately jumped to the conclusion that Gongseop was here because he thinks Zack is gonna lose means it's himself that Zack doesn't trust. Gongseop says he came to Busan to fulfill his promise to Daniel Park, not because he was worried about Zack. He advises Zack to believe in himself first and stop obsessing over winning or losing. Whilst Gongseop is saying this, Song Hashik jumps behind Zack and tells him to focus, aiming a knee directly at the back of his head. We then see a cool little impact panel and cut directly to a close-up of Song Hashik's face, which seems to be worried about something, and that something happens to be Gongseop blocking Hashik's knee with the wooden fish, and he says, obsession brings suffering, only by following the noble path can it be eradicated. That's what the Four Noble Truths are about. Honestly, Gongseop just continues to make some Bruce Lee-esque quotes throughout this exchange and it gets a little repetitive, but Hashik decides to call this man a pig, which seems to have struck a nerve in Gongseop's beanbag-shaped body, and Gongseop says that back in the day, just hearing his name made people shit and pee their pants, and that just because he shaved his head and grabbed a wooden fish doesn't mean some random first generation member should dare to pick a fight with him. He then squares up with the guy and proceeds to adapt the stance of a recently employed Arab uncle, and he says he's gonna show the guy the difference between a first generation member and a first generation king. We then cut to Hudson absolutely defeated next to the wall, and Taesoo walks in front of him and tells him not to apologize for he is the son of Ansan, and today the sun is merely set. All Hudson needs to do is become the sun that never sets again. We then cut to Taesoo talking to the blonde guy, whose name I unfortunately do not remember, and do not plan on keeping in my memory to be honest, and it seems like Taesoo isn't planning on it either, as he only remembers people from the first generation who were strong. The guy says it was a nice provocation, but he doesn't really seem fazed, and he continues to talk shit about Taesoo's values and beliefs, saying how Taesoo teaches his own student not to use his left hand, but then he uses his left hand whilst getting his ass kicked by James Z, and he asks if the king of Ansan does not know shame. The guy says Taesoo is no longer a man when he betrayed his own beliefs, and Taesoo agrees with him. He says that at that time, he was nothing but a wretched beast, and I mean, just look at the guy. I guess this is what fighting James Lee does to a motherfucker. He was blinded by vengeance and abandoned something he never should have, and this is where PTJ begins to really strengthen our understanding of the relationship between Hudson and Taesoo, which I think to this day is probably the best depiction of a master and disciple relationship in Lookism so far, or at least one of the best, because Gun and Daniel is also pretty good. But unlike other students that only learn from their teachers and are merely there to carry on their legacy, not really benefiting the actual master themselves, the relationship between Hudson and Taesoo is kind of like a mutual benefit kind of situation. Well, I mean, Hudson obviously benefits more than Taesoo because Taesoo has taught him likely everything he knows, but still, Taesoo is also benefiting from Hudson, and this plays into the notion that the first generation is still not over yet, which I'm gonna cover more in depth in another video. Taesoo says that on that day that he lost to James Lee, seeing Hudson cry brought him back to his senses. He realized he must not become someone who Hudson is embarrassed of. He must stand proud with integrity. He could stand on his own 2 feet again because of Hudson, which is honestly really wholesome. He says Hudson is the son to me too, whilst throwing a Power Mastery infused haymaker right at the blonde boy's face. Unfortunately though, PTJ decides to delay Taesoo's cool moment, and whilst he's throwing his punch, the other guy seems to throw a punch at the same time and says, let me break you again. It wasn't just one punch though. It was 8 consecutive jabs infused with speed mastery, and this is a textbook example of when one mastery overpowers another. Speed doesn't always overpower strength, but it does in this scenario. Taesoo steps to the side and throws another punch at the man, but again, it's useless as he eats a punch right in his stomach, which this one doesn't even seem to be infused with any type of mastery whatsoever. This was just a counter punch. And Taesoo starts bleeding from the mouth and wondering what kind of material the guy's prosthetic hand that he hit him with was made of, and this is where we get the confirmation of one of the current biggest theories going around the Lookism community, which is that these members of the Jinrang gang did indeed lose their limbs to James Lee, which is kind of obvious if I'm being honest. I mean, what are the odds that it would have been another man that was in pursuit of the same quest as James Lee anyway? We cut to a panel of James after he defeated this blonde guy, and he says his fighting skills are on par with those of a region's king. He says, Busan sure is a dangerous city. To think there are 4 more guys like you, whilst stepping on the guy's hand. And this is exactly where the James Fleet allegations hopefully come to an end, when James says that today Jinrang gang will be completely eliminated. How unfortunate that Jinrang is in prison. The first generation's end is nearing. The second generation will rise soon. This is honestly one of the coldest end of fight quotes I've ever seen from a character in this manhwa so far, pretty much saying that he came here to square up with Jinrang and his whole entire gang alone, and end his entire generation just to start a new one for a reason we aren't so sure of yet. James Lee then says, I'll be taking a part of your body for the new generation, and immediately almost every Lookism fan jumps to the theory that James was collecting body parts to create Danny's second body, which is an archaic theory that's been here for centuries now, and honestly, I mean, it's possible, but I don't particularly agree with it. Especially since, I mean, if he's already taken these dudes' hands, then why would he decide to take the other white-haired dude's fingers whom Jae-gyeon is meant to be fighting right now? And on top of that, I don't see why he would just randomly choose which limb to take without considering which one would be the most effective. Considering if he was planning on making an overpowered second body for Daniel, he would have chosen Taesoo's right hand, for example, not his eye. I think the more plausible scenario reasoning for him taking their body parts is that perhaps he was merely trying to kill their spirits, was kind of a mockery type thing. After this panel, we cut back to blonde guy beating the fuck out of Taesoo with his speed mastery punches, saying that's when we started. We were no longer complacent. We waited for the day Jinrang would be out. We taught our successors in secret and trained to make up for the body parts he cut off. I resent James Lee, but I'm also thankful to him. Thanks to him, I got this, he says whilst we zoom in on his gold prosthetic hand. An invincible fist that surpasses all limits, and he rocks the absolute fucking shit out of Taesoo with a power mastery punch while saying his fist isn't the only thing he's got. He's grown stronger too, as he dodges one of Taesoo's punches. But what about Taesoo? He asks whilst punching him right in the nose. Here he makes a bold claim which seems to have struck a nerve for Taesoo, saying he was the same as when he lost to James Lee. He hasn't even grown remotely stronger. He says he's gonna be his second James Lee whilst rushing directly at him and seemingly aiming for a finishing blow. Taesoo asks, "You're gonna become James Lee? I don't feel guilty about using this now," whilst charging up a power mastery punch that looks strong enough to break down the Great Wall Trump was planning on building. And this guy immediately underestimates Taesoo, saying he won't land his punch because he's not as fast as him, which I mean, he was kind of right to make that assumption. A guy like Taesoo who only uses his right fist and heavily relies on his punching power being faster than a guy with speed mastery, it just didn't really make any sense to him. We then cut to a flashback after Taesoo lost the second time to James Lee, and with the new art style we see that James seems to be much more shredded than we thought he was. And Taesoo says, "I lost everything. I realized I had walked the wrong path. After losing everything, I could see what was important, myself. So I started over, to create the perfect right hand, the perfect toes, the perfect thighs, every body part including the strength of my left hand I didn't swing. I used it all for my right fist." The other guy says, "I'll dodge and end this," thinking he's gonna easily dodge a punch from Taesoo, until he gets hit with a hydrogen bomb of an attack infused with both power mastery and Taesoo's newly unlocked speed mastery, which my friend Saint predicted, and I'm sure a bunch of you guys may have as well. And he says the other guy couldn't dodge because he made this attack for James Lee, which I mean, let's be real here, James Lee is not getting hit with that. Taesoo says, "Jae-guang-do, you said you've grown stronger after losing your fist to James Lee? You're wrong. That very moment, you gave up on yourself, and a guy who's given up on himself can't win against anyone. I realized that just now." After Taesoo unlocks speed mastery and finishes his fight and his end of fight speech talking to a motherfucker who's probably in a coma as we speak, we cut to Jae-gyeon approaching the white-haired man who was fighting Eli Jang, asking who was the guy who threw bricks at his car. Eli, without even waiting a heartbeat, immediately snitches on the guy, saying it's him, and asks who Jae-gyeon even is. And although Eli has no idea who Jae-gyeon is, the man whom he's fighting certainly knows, as he immediately starts profusely sweating as if he just saw the devil in human form, looking like he forgot to take the trash out. Jae-gyeon says, "You punk, where's the respect?" The guy immediately lunges at him with a claw strike, however Jae-gyeon dodges with ease, and the guy starts infusing his attacks with speed mastery. However, he is still unable to touch a base Jae-gyeon, which I mean, this is the second time we see a major speed feat from this guy and he's literally only in base. How fast do you guys think Jae-gyeon would be if he had speed mastery? Invisible attacks maybe even faster than James Lee. The guy realizes he's cooked because his fastest attacks aren't even touching Jae-gyeon and his facial expression speaks for itself. He's absolutely petrified right now according to Eli, and Jae-gyeon walks up to the dude, grabs him by the cheek and says, "Are you fighting or crying? Choose one. Why are you so scared? Isn't Busan all about pride? Get your act together. After all, you gotta protect that pride." And the chapter ends with a dialogue box labeling Jae-gyeon as not only the King of Incheon but with 3 question marks below his title and above his name, which gives me the same vibes as when James Lee was first being introduced, to be honest. He's mysterious, we don't know shit about the guy, but the entire verse seems to be terrified of him, and his design also resembles a K-pop star. Let me know what you guys thought of the chapter down below if you want. Join the Discord if you want. Like the video if you want. Subscribe if you want. Click off now if you want.